What happens once we type a domain name in the browser? So for example, in this case, let's say that we are typing example.com in our browser. So what will happen is the browser in turn will send the request to the server where example.com is hosted, and the server will return us the HTML file. So what is a browser? Browser is a complex software application which has many parts, many components, and the main component of it, main functionality of it, is driven by a rendering engine. For example, Google Chrome uses the Blink engine, Firefox uses the Gecko engine, and so on. So what are the main parts of the rendering engine? Main parts of it and what it does, what the rendering engine does. First, when it receives the HTML, it parses the raw HTML, it builds a DOM tree. We are going to talk about it a bit later. Then it parses the CSS. If we have CSS, then it combines DOM and the CSS. It calculates the position and it throws it to the screen. So in our case, when we receive a HTML, so what in reality will happen is the rendering engine will take that HTML and it will parse that HTML and it will build the DOM tree. So for example, let's take a very simple example. Let's say that our example.com returned us an HTML, a simple HTML, which has only two parts, which has the two parts. The first one is that the header, hello, and it has a paragraph. This is a paragraph. So what will happen is rendering engine will parse it and will build a DOM tree. DOM tree visually would look like following, right? It will have a document. It's a root node, and that root node will have one child, HTML. HTML also will have one child, body, and body will have two children, H1 and the P, and the H1 will have a text hello, and the P will have a text. This is a paragraph. If we look at how exactly it will look like on the code side, because rendering engines, they are mainly using C++. Let's say that on the C++, how it would look like, how a DOM tree would look like, it will look like as a tree, right? As a tree data structure. So that the node will have a tag name, and it will have another field, which is the vector or array of the nodes is children. So why it's important? Why it's important to know that how the browser parses HTML and how it builds a DOM tree. So let's take another example. Let's take example where we are receiving an HTML, and that HTML also has also JavaScript, right? So we have also script, as you can see here, script.js, and our JavaScript has one function, right? The function is that the change title. So whenever we click on the button on the HTML side, so what happens is that we are getting the element by title. So in this case, what the ID title, we are getting the element, which is the header, which is our header, and we are changing the hello from hello to hello JavaScript. So that's what happens when we are click on the button, right? So the DOM tree in this case would look like following. So we'll have, again, as a root, we will have a document. It will have one child HTML. It will have two children, head and the body, and the DOM tree will be built. Again, the C++ code, C++ version of it will be the same. So we have a tree data structure. We have a tag name. We have a children. So what will happen is we will get the HTML. We will parse the HTML. And since there is in the script, there is nothing to execute, we will just build the DOM tree, and after building a DOM tree, what's going to happen once we press the change title, right? Once we press the change title, so what will happen is the DOM tree that we have built, it will be modified. So JavaScript will modify the C++ code. So C++ DOM tree structure that we have built. How exactly that's going to happen? So for example, in the C++ side, let's say that it will look like following, right? Code will look like following. So we have an element, we have a text, a hello world, and we have, once we click on the button, so what will happen is in the JavaScript, we will find an element by the title, and we will change the text content from the hello to the hello from the JavaScript, right? So once we click on the button, the JavaScript will change the C++ code, the DOM tree structures that we have built, it will change it. So how exactly how exactly JavaScript will change the code on the C++ side. So for that, we are using engines. For example, we have a V8 engine or a Spider Monkey engine. So what will happen is, what will actually happen, a GS code will call the C++ DOM binding layer. Binding layer will modify that the DOM object, the DOM tree structure that we have already built. So, for example, in our case, it will set the value for the title for the node with the ID of title. It will change from the hello world to hello from GS. And then it will trigger the rendering, right? It will render layout, paint, and the composite. So if we look at the modern browser nowadays, right? So the modern browser nowadays has it has a lot of parts. So three important parts are the JavaScript engine or a binding layer. So what it does is it does all the work that related to the JavaScript, for example, that interacting with the C++ and the modifying the DOM tree structure that we have built and so on. So rendering engine, what it does is rendering engine is another crucial part of the modern browsers are rendering layer. So what it does is it parses the HTML, it parses the CSS, it builds the DOM tree, and it also does the layout and the rendering. Also, we have the graphics, we have the network stack, we have also a storage layer. And mainly these parts, because the browser are expected to be, the execution expected to be fast, the main language that we are using is C++. So if we compare that, what are the main browsers, right? The main browsers in the market, which engines they are using nowadays. So mainly the engines that are used for the GS engine is V8 is used for example, by Chrome, by the Edge, by the Opera, and also for the layout we are using Blink, and for graphics we are using Skia.